June 9th, and we're talking with Dick and Nancy Ponzi about IPNC. And I've got a number of questions for you two about the beginnings of IPNC, and really the goal here is to tell the sort of the broader story of it. So could you talk a little bit about what was the impetus for the IPNC in the first place? Why did you start it?
Well, just to start off, there was a lot of suffering beforehand in terms of marketing Pinot Noir. So we were always, as a small group, scheming and trying to figure out a twist or some way to get more recognition for Oregon and for Pinot Noir. So it was, I think, an opportunity to try to generate an interest for the grape and for our region. Mm-hmm.
The impetus? Yes, it was a completely marketing-driven idea of how to familiarize people in general with Pinot Noir. I think that it always has to be kept in the background of the IPNC that 25 years ago, people didn't talk about Pinot Noir. There was rarely Pinot Noir on a wine list. Maybe it was obscurely over with other kind of strange reds. It just wasn't known. Mm-hmm. And I think it was very daring and risky and innovative to do this celebration and not just call it a wine celebration, but call it a Pinot Noir celebration.
Mm-hmm. So what were the overall goals for you all when you first started this? So you've kind of said you've been suffering and you're trying to get some marketing going. I think one of the things I know that is that the two of you, probably more than most of the others, are also focused on the side of the issue of food and wine. Was that part of something that you thought of at the very beginning?
Well, I think we were always involved with food, but I think more importantly, we, in our travels, in learning how to grow grape and how to make the wine, we did travel a lot to Europe. So we did develop some kind of a kinship with people who were working with that grape. And I think we recognized that we had a lot in common. We had the grape in common, but we also had marketing to some extent, how to market the wine. And also, they were enjoyable people. And it turns out, fortunately, I think, that they were newer generation. They were young winemakers who came onto the scene about that time, in Burgundy particularly. And they were interested in what we were doing. In spite of the fact that we went there initially to learn from them, they were also interested in what we were doing. So there was a real common interest, I think, by all. Now, food was awful. I mean, part of wine in our background has always been an important component of having wines at the dinner table. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, I think another aspect is we're always marketing Pinot Noir as a food wine. And that sounds kind of trite now, but again, take it back 25 years, that this was a wine to go with food. That's what Pinot Noir is about. And it was very, very important to bring in that component in any kind of event that we did.
So another thing that is several people have already talked about is the word celebration in IPNC, that it's there was discussion about why using that particular term versus other terms that might be available. Can you talk a little bit about what some of the reasoning was in calling it a celebration?
Well, again, it goes back to the variety, I think, in terms of its rarity and how to bring it about to the front of the wine category. And we recognized that there were a lot of auctions being done, a lot of tastings, and commonly the question was, why this grape and why are you doing it here? And so the knowledge of Pinot Noir and where it's grown and why you grow it in certain regions and not other regions, I think came out of that. And we realized that we weren't in competition with other producers of the world, but we needed to work together to bring more focus onto the variety. So the celebration was really a real key ingredient to it all. Let's bring people together to celebrate this grape and make it kind of to the forefront of the wine category.
At that time, there were competitions going on, and that was one method that we did get publicity, and that was a marketing tool as well to enter competitions. But we didn't want to do the competition. We realized we weren't in competition with each other here at all. We had to work together here, and we had to work with the other few Pinot Noir producers in the world as well. So we didn't want it all to bring in this competitive thing of who's the best. We were all really good. We just wanted to show how good the Pinot Noir was. We came up with the word celebration rather than festival, and I think that was, in retrospect, a genius idea to do.
Now, where did that name come from?
Yeah, don't ask who thought of it.
Who originated it? But I think that's an important ingredient to all this, is that there was a collaboration, there were discussions, many of them in the back of Nick's restaurant, a good meeting place, central meeting place to a lot of the wineries. And so it's like you sit around the table and you're drinking, and ideas keep flying around, and some things stick and some don't stick. And I think it was almost universal that that term would fit perfectly with Pinot Noir and what we wanted to do.
We didn't argue about that one nearly as much as Oregon Pinot Camp. That was many meetings. And now it's so good.
Well, that's because the industry was much larger than we
yes,
had
we had more people to decide.
Yeah, so it was a small group, so it was rather easy to come to a consensus of sorts.
So about when would you say the first discussions about having it were held? Was this, because the first one was...
Well, I remember it, again, a lot of it came about from casual discussions. And then when 2 or 3 of us were to get together, it would come up. And I guess the more formal meeting I remember was at Nick's in the back room, and it was called, let's get together with all the principals and let's discuss this and how you might do it. So that's at least my remembering of it.
Yeah, it was a lot of casual stuff. So I think that's why everybody, probably you're finding everybody has a different point where they were brought in. Well, the beginning was, but that's because we were all over the place. So,
yeah.
But yeah, when we had formal meetings in the beginning, it was at Next.
It's like someone coming up now and saying, I got a great idea. And then you say, oh, okay. And the idea gets spread, and then finally someone says, let's get together and talk about this. And I think that's pretty much how it came together.
Well, actually, we've discussed all the other parts of the IPNC except international. So how did it come to be the international celebration, and how realistic did you feel that was at the very beginning?
It was amazingly realistic. That was the really fun part. We had these associations with people in Burgundy that had been established. I'm sure the name Rebecca Wasserman has come up in your, and an American woman who still lives in Burgundy and was exporting Burgundian wines here. And so she was a real contact person for us at that point. And she, of course, saw the marketing possibilities there. And then with our travels, we met different people, and there was a lot of exchange going on. So I'd say that was also in the sort of casual sort of stuff that coalesced into a real idea.
And it was a young group in Europe at that time. I think the older generation, not to speak down on them, but their tradition was to pretty much stay within their own winery and stay close to their own businesses. But the young people coming around at that time were very curious. They were as curious as we were initially. So I think they caught on to the idea pretty well. A little skeptical in terms of why should they come to the United States and celebrate with an unknown kind of a place, but But they did know us, so they knew us, and I think they trusted us, that we weren't going to exploit them. We weren't going to say that we're like Burgundy, Oregon was like Burgundy. They understood that there wasn't going to be a competition, and that we weren't going to say that we make wines as good as Burgundy, because that was typically going on all over the other wine regions. I mean, California was always trying to compare themselves to Bordeaux's or some regions, and they're as good as. And they saw us in the IPNC, the French saw us as allies, and they saw that this could help them as well. And when we described that we were doing, excuse me, seminars, that we were actually educating during this celebration, they caught on to it. The young people did. And fortunately, they were good producers from good families. And so the adventure of coming here, they loved that. It was an exciting thing for them, and it was exciting for us to house them and put them up. So it was a marvelous coming together at that time.
Now, am I correct in I thought I've heard a couple of times that there was the idea of actually possibly rotating it or moving it or not, and not.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we had no intention of doing this year after year. It was a lot of work. That's why it's become a thing, and there's a real executive director, but it was all volunteer. Yeah, and we thought, oh, this would be so fun. We'll do it, and then we'll all go to Burgundy, and that'll be fun too. What we found out is it wouldn't work at all. They didn't have the community. Of course, all the people are there, but they don't have the community spirit that we had here. It was never going to happen in Burgundy. It still would not happen in Burgundy. I know Australia has put a similar thing together. But it was the thinking here that we were really working together. It had to be here.
Well, it does seem like
Didn't work in California either, I might point out.
Well, the concept that this could grow, I mean, people came to IPNC, winemakers from all over the world, because it was an international affair. And the exciting thing that was happening over the years, we would invite other regions and we would focus on them. We would focus on Burgundy for a year or two, and then we would focus maybe on some other regions that were developing, New Zealand, for example. And then eventually we had countries from all over represented. And for that reason, they were seminars that were to educate, and they were educating the winemakers as well as the public who was interested in Pinot Noir. And it was interesting.
Our international was not all that international to begin with. It was Burgundy.
Yeah.
We did have California people.
We did have California, a token number. But it was exciting to see over the years. Germany came into it, Australia came into it, South Africa came into it. I mean, people wanted to come because it was growing, and they saw the support that they could get from growing this grape. Pretty exciting.
Yeah. So, where would you put IPNC in terms of the big picture of Oregon wine history? Where would you kind of place this event?
Well, I'd say it's very major from many standpoints, from industries in countries that I just described that didn't have a big industry of Pinot Noir or of that grape, came here and saw the potential, and so that grew. And all of the relationships that were made here by all of these international people coming was an encouragement for them to go back and do as good of a job or better than what they experienced here. Now, I think what Nancy says is right. We had a community of people who really volunteered this effort, and some of these other regions didn't have that. People have tried to duplicate it, even in California, to some extent, and but I don't think they had that spirit of working together, which we've always had, and it's one of the marvelous stories behind Oregon, basically, is how we've collaborated on a lot of these events.
Well, it sounds like it's even been an interesting collaboration between, you've got Linfield College and you've got McMinnville, and I hear stories about the sheriff and the mayor surveying, and so it's just this also interesting, kind of beyond even just the wine folks.
Well, the local people realized that something was happening. I mean, why would anybody from South Africa come to Oregon or from Australia come to McMinnville? I mean, when we first came to Oregon and looked at wine regions and traveled to McMinnville, we weren't too impressed with McMinnville. It was so far away from the opera and the ballet and the symphony that we just decided to get a little closer. But it did a lot, I think, for McMinnville, and to have that lovely campus at Linfield was a perfect site for it, and it was fairly central to the industry, so it was a natural to have it there, I think. And it took a lot of cohesion and giving up a lot and educating the people who were in administration, and they've come around, as you know.
I think you were asking about the importance of IPNC to the industry overall, and I think it has been a very huge milestone. And one of the reasons is that it was a marketing thing, but we were marketing Pinot Noir, we were marketing Oregon. And that's, I think, why people have been willing to cooperate so much and why we're willing to rotate out. This was discussed a lot because, of course, those of us who were first in just sort of thought that we would do it. But then we realized rotating in and out is great because the purpose is not to promote your winery. Personally, I don't think Ponzi has ever viewed IPNC as a Ponzi marketing event. We have other things that's what it is. But IPNC has always been Oregon and Pinot Noir. So fine, if we drop out for a year or 2 years even, that's fine. It kind of means you don't have to do it. As fun as it is.
So what are some of the major challenges that you all first encountered in those first years in getting this set up?
Well, it was focused on education along with that celebration, and so we had to come up with programs, seminars, and bring people to these seminars, and I have to say that the seminars were very small, not as extensive as they are now. Even the food is not as extensive as it was now, but we didn't have that many participants either. So I think the challenge was to keep the seminars interesting, to draw the public in, but also to draw the producers who were visiting. So we always went to the very best producers and put them on panels and develop programs where they could be more useful and influential, basically. And the seminars had to be kind of compromised in a way. You were dealing with the public, the general public, but people very dedicated to Pinot Noir in terms of their tastes. But we also wanted to make them a little technical, but not too much. So keeping that balance, I think, was important. And as it grew, it became more apparent which areas to concentrate on and how to divide that up. So food became more important. You know, we did the vineyard tours individually with buses going in all parts of the country, and then we'd have the formal sit-down kind of seminars with questions and answers and tastings.
I think everything was a challenge.
Yeah.
Was a challenge to, just the location itself was extremely challenging. And again, we'll recall that for some reason it's frequently been really hot during IPNC, and we had those buildings at Linfield that had no air conditioning in them. That wasn't very conducive to your audience having a real good time. At the food, sitting and eating elaborate food in a sweltering room was challenging. Getting people to come, we had to really beg people to come originally. I mean, why would they come to Oregon for this? We had to build that up. So we had to get press to come, and we always knew that that was really important. The food itself was a huge challenge because of there wasn't really the facility to do that kind of cooking service there. It's really kind of amazing it all got together and that everybody did, in the end, have a really great time. The wines were good, the people were, in the spirit of the thing. And I think it was so great that it was there on the campus, which rather than in a convention hall or that sort of thing, it really lent itself to this friendliness and has served as a great background. It's been a continual challenge. Well, I think it's an advantage, but also a challenge that you really can't grow it. It's limited because of the space. But that has also kept it exclusive and charming and friendly.
So you mentioned sort of the having a good time. Does each of you maybe have sort of a memorable story from IPNC, from one of the ones you attended or the formation of it, or that you'd like to share?
Let's see, a memorable good time? Is that what?
Either way.
That one? Oh my goodness!
I said memorable. I'm not looking at you.
Well, the one
There's been
incident.
so many. What?
Well, that one incident, we would try to bring writers in from the East Coast because that's where the press was, and we'd bring some pretty influential writers out, and they were coming to. This was an area that most of them hadn't even experienced. So
They didn't even know where it was.
yeah, we had to be very careful that they were accommodated well because they were used to being taken care of. But once they got here, most of them got it. They really understood the friendliness of the area. Everywhere they turned, whether they were in Portland or McMinnville, it didn't matter. If they were looking for an assistance of somebody on the street, they usually got it. And this one event that we had Frank Pryle, who was the writer for the New York Times at the time. And he brought his wife out. And it might have been his second time, because he was pretty free and he really enjoyed coming. And he wanted to get away from the heat of New York City, in July. So he came to the event, and it's a several-day event, and the main dinner is that first day. And everything is done very precisely in terms of timing and everything, and the security has to be very, very well attended to because some of these events are outside. But this one time we had the dinner inside, and security is out by the door, and the dinner is started, and we found out the next day that Frank Pryle was late for dinner and came to the front door and was not admitted. So he missed out on the day of the major dinner and had to go to McMinnville somewhere, maybe to the Blue Moon or somewhere, and have his dinner.
Blue Moon.
So we talked to him the next day, and he just thought that was so much fun. He realized, the temperament of the people, and he realized the security that had to be there, and he knew it wasn't deliberate, of course, and he took it in good stride and with good humor. So we actually changed people's personality about Oregon and how friendly it can be, and if they aren't friendly, it's generally a mistake.
And he's retired now, but he has remained a lifelong friend of Oregon, of Pinot Noir, really done a lot for Oregon. So there were all those sorts of spin-offs that happened because of this.
Relationships, yeah.
Yeah, the relationships that were developed.
Yeah.
And what is there something that you would have taken away, speaking of either the relationships or the exchange of ideas over the years that you've taken away personally from IPNC?
Well, there's so many things. We're sitting here at our winery where our daughter is the winemaker. This is her domain. when she decided to seriously go into winemaking, she went to the font, and she would never have known about the school in Beaune and Burgundy. She would never have considered how, at all, how she would get there. It was only because of the relationships that had developed. She was the first American woman to go there. And it was all because of IPNC, because of the people that she knew there. She was welcome. She had places to stay. She already knew people. It would never have happened. And there have been a few other kids from here that have gone to Beaune subsequently. You know, and this has enriched both Burgundy and Oregon.
And those relationships go beyond Burgundy. They go to wherever people have come from. New Zealand, for example. There are winemakers in New Zealand that have come very often to IPNC. We're always welcome there now. It's like part of the family. As I mentioned, South Africa. We've been to South Africa and made contacts with people who've been to IPNC. They consider, people away from this area, consider it a privilege to come here, basically. It is everything that a celebration should be. It's a little bit intellectual. It's food. It's the relationships of people from all over the world. It's like everybody's coming to this one little place of McMinnville. It's unbelievable. But probably not any different than maybe Beaune to a lot of people. But it is a meeting place. People look forward to it in many cases. I'll see you next year at IPNC if I'm asked to come. Will you be there next year? Well, I think that's the year we rotate out. Okay, can we come and visit you? So it goes on, those relationships. And it's very rewarding, and even the next generation is kind of seeming to be taking that on too. So it won't stop, I don't think.
I think that's a great place to end. I think those are all the questions we have. So thanks.
Okay.
It's terrific.